Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build a priest. It seems kind of strange to me that they would allow military vehicles to have such a position in the church, but I'm not a religious man, so what would I know? Anyway, this is the Flames of War M7 Priest. It's a plastic wargaming kit in 15mm or 1/100th scale, and as the front of the box would suggest, it allows us to build 3 of this vehicle. The back of the box tells us that this is an all-plastic kit, that there are 3 M7 Priest 105mm self-propelled guns, a decal sheet, and a unit card. There's also an exploded diagram that will function as instructions. You can also find instructions on the Flames of War website, and those are a little bit more in-depth than the back of the box. I'll include a link to those in the description below, though you could just watch the rest of this video to see how the model is built. That would obviously be the coolest option. Inside the box you'll find 3 of these sprues, each of which contains all of the parts you'll need to build an M7 Priest. There's not a whole lot of parts here, this is a relatively simple wargaming kit after all. It may be simple, but that's not a bad thing, and the detailing is quite good, especially considering the low number of parts. The upper hull part in particular is quite nicely done. There's a lot of stuff moulded onto this both inside and out. The single track parts are also quite good looking, and you'll see that there are 2 machine guns. You only really need 1, but this is great if you happen to break one, and they're always nice to have in the bits box as well. There is of course going to be some simplification of detail owing to both the small scale of the model and the fact that small fine details and wargames don't really mix. Still, the parts look good and everything is nice and neatly moulded. Of course, mould lines are always a thing, but they're very minor on this kit and cleanup should be a breeze. There are also crew figures. There are 3 copies of 2 sculpts for a total of 6 figures here, so not much in the way of variety, but they look alright. If you are inclined to use crew figures and you want some variety, it probably isn't too hard to find other suitable figures, especially if you happen to have already built a bunch of US Flames of War stuff. Decals are also included. This seems uncommon in Flames of War kits nowadays, and I think this is because this is an older kit. Not that I'm complaining, of course. There's a bunch of stars and numbers here. Not much in the way of variety, but it's pretty much what you need for M7s, which I guess is the point. A stat card is also included for all of your stat card needs. Well, as long as your stat card needs are related to the M7 Priest. This card will be helpful in reminding you of all of this vehicle's stats, but it won't be of much use for other vehicles. And that's everything that was in the box. Now, let's start gluing some bits of plastic together. I start by gluing the track sets to the lower hull part. Like a lot of other Flames of War kits, these have keying to ensure that you put the tracks on the correct side, so that you don't end up with them all backwards or upside down. Though, come to think of it, you probably could put them on upside down if you wanted. But don't. I mean, unless you really want to. The tracks are obviously quite easy to get into place. If you want, you could install the transmission casing and rear plate before doing this, but I'm told this way is easier. And speaking of those things, the next thing I did was to install the transmission casing. This resisted a little bit, but it's not too hard to get into place. I apply some pressure and a bit of extra glue, and then I turn my attention to the rear, where I install the rear plate, which is in no way an odd place for such a thing to be placed. This is just as easy to install as the transmission. I apply a little bit of pressure and a reasonable amount of glue to satisfy the glue god, and our M7 now has a rear plate. Now, why not install the middle part of the hull, I guess you might call it. This is pretty easy. It almost drops right into place, but I did find I had to apply some pressure to get it properly seated. A little glue on the inside, which is probably a bit redundant, but I do like to be redundant sometimes. Next, the upper hull part. I add glue to all of the areas I can see there's going to be contact, and then I press the part into place. You probably won't be surprised when I say that this is nice and easy, or maybe you will be, I don't know. There was a little bit of a gap at the rear, so I added some more glue and a bit of pressure to eliminate that, which was simple enough. There is still a bit of a gap on the sides of this rear boxy thing, but those wouldn't be too hard to fill in if you felt a need to do so. Next, it's time for the main gun. I was initially hesitant about drilling this out because it is pretty small, but I'm glad that I did. It makes the gun look so much better. I used a 0.6mm drill bit to make the hole, though it turns out it was a bit small. I made the hole a bit wider by carefully twirling my knife inside the opening. You could also just use a bigger bit, but this was quicker than changing bits, and the result is pretty good. Now that the gun is all drilled out and nice looking, why not install it? There is a spot this will kind of sit in, but it doesn't really lock into any particular position. It wasn't obvious, at least not to me, where exactly this should sit. Eventually I got it into a position that I was happy with, and that I think looks reasonably convincing. The drilled out gun barrel really does make this look quite good. Next, I attached the pulpit. This is what makes the vehicle a priest. Like pretty much everything else, this part is easy to position. I just make sure there's adequate glue and pressure to be sure there aren't any gaps. A machine gun is something very important to American priests, and every pulpit has one, so it makes sense to install one on the model. This is obviously quite easy to install, and you could swivel it around to point in any direction you like. However, I've chosen forwards because why not? And that's the basics of the vehicle completed. There are some optional pieces of stowage included in the kit though. The instructions don't mention these at all really, so there aren't any particular places that you're meant to put them. So I just fiddle around with them until something looks right or interesting, and then I glue the part on. I have no idea if putting this roll on the back of the fighting compartment is historically accurate, but it seems plausible to me, so why not? I thought about putting the shorter one on the side here, but in the end I chose to omit it. Then I put the spare road wheel up here on the engine deck. I figure this might have just been tossed here by the crew, rather than being bolted into a specific position or something like that. There's a set of what I think are British-style fuel cans, flimsies. I couldn't find a spot that I liked these in, so I left them off as well. I glue the jerry can to the left rear here. It seemed like as sensible a spot as any for it, and that's it. Of course, there are 3 of each piece of stowage, 1 on each sprue, and of course there's nothing saying that you can't install more than 1 on a vehicle, but here I've only used 1 of each part. Except for the 2 parts that I didn't use, obviously. Anyway, that's the 15mm scale plastic M7 Priest self-propelled gun by Battlefront completed. The model is intended for their game Flames of War, but it is certainly suitable for any game that uses vehicles like this in 15mm scale. Or if you want to be really funny, and you play a priest character in D&D or something, maybe you could use this as a model. That would be hilarious. Ha ha ha. So funny, Herbert. I'm quite happy with how this has turned out. I think this is a really nice looking little model, and in the distant future when it gets painted, I think it's going to look amazing. Just as importantly, it was a fun, quick and easy kit to put together. Obviously, being a wargaming kit, it is designed to be quick and easy to put together. This is mainly for people who would likely want to get this thing into their force and out fighting quickly, rather than spending hours gluing tiny bits of detailing to their model. And sometimes that's exactly what I want as a modeler. When I built this, it was a nice relaxing little build and stream, which is exactly what I needed. For the simplicity of the build, the detail is still quite good. It's obviously not a highly accurate and super detailed display piece, that's not its purpose, but it's very clear that this is an M7 Priest. You won't be mistaking it for a Sherman or something. I think this looks really good. I have no idea how effective or useful these are when it comes to games like Flames of War, but if my US forces ever feel like bringing along some M7s for any reason, now they can. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comment section below. If you happen to have built one of these or any other cool models and you'd like to share, why not drop by our Discord community and show some pictures? We would love to see what you've done. If you would like to watch me build kits like this live and chat with myself and the good folks in chat, head on over to my Twitch channel. The link is in the description below. And if you've not already done so, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron if you would like to see my videos a bit early, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch. Links to all of my things are in the description below, and, as always, I shall return soon. So, until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.